free. Just search.
Hello everyone and welcome back into the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast. And for our third segment of today's show, we transition to the world of college football, letting it linger a little while longer before all the CFP talk kind of dissipates for a little bit and we transition into more of what's going to happen in the off season. Let's look a little bit at the college football playoff, specifically the players who define it, specifically in the offensive side of the football. CBS Sports did release an All-CFP team, and I was eager to examine it and eager to present it to you guys, see what you think about it. So let me know what you think in the comments about all the players on this list, specifically offensively. But without further ado, let's just jump right into it and really analyze this list. Starting off with the QB position, I think it's undoubted who should be the QB of this All-CFP team. It is Mr. Will Howard. I don't necessarily think I have a segment here. I'll fix that immediately. Let's talk about Will Howard for a little bit. First ever CFP quarterback to throw for over 1,000 yards. Only Joe Burrow has ever come that close, but ultimately doing it in 4 games will eventually be looked down upon a little bit, but it's still impressive nonetheless because he did it against a team like Oregon, who was formerly the number 1 team in the nation, and against a team like Tennessee, who a lot of people were saying would go on the road and beat up this Ohio State team after that painful loss to Michigan, but he proved them wrong. He had 300 plus yards and 5 passing touchdowns in both of those games, and in a game against Texas where he was going up against a much better defense, he was still very efficient, and he still knew what he had to do and understood the assignment, so to speak. He didn't necessarily force things downfield against this elite Texas secondary, and he really played within himself to the point where their ball control ultimately won them that football game. So, kudos to Will Howard. Yes, in theory, 1,000 yards thrown across 4 games is going to be less impressive than, say, Joe Burrow's stats across 2, but it's still very important to know because that's what could happen in the 12-team playoff. A lot of these quarterbacks who could be unsung heroes for their teams all season long could suddenly catch fire and eventually, like Will Howard and Ohio State, find themselves winning a national championship. So kudos for him for taking advantage of a quote-unquote second opportunity. Now let's talk about the running back position. We could have had so many running backs. We could have had a guy like Travion Henderson, who because of Quinshon Judkins, who hint is on this All-CFP team, could have made it himself. We could have seen potentially Jaden Blue as an underrated piece on this team, scoring 2 touchdowns in that game against Ohio State, really being one of Texas's best offensive weapons in that game. We could have seen a guy like Quintravion Wisner for that performance against Clemson. But ultimately, Quinshon Judkins and Nicholas Singleton steal the cake here. Take the cake, rather. Now, I mixed up my phrases a little bit. Let's talk about Quinshon Judkins, though, because while Travion Henderson certainly had the more explosive plays, I feel like Quinshon Judkins' performance in the CFP championship game could not go understated. He had 99 yards on the ground, 2 rushing touchdowns, and a receiving touchdown as well, and his versatility really helped this Ohio State red zone offense especially, and really balanced out the explosiveness of the downfield passing game between Howard and his guys and Buka, Smith, and others as well. And then, in terms of Nicholas Singleton, let's talk about him a little bit. He really was the offensive centerpiece in that game for Penn State against Notre Dame in the CFP semifinal, scoring 3 of their touchdowns and really being very impressive in terms of his versatility as a receiver as well. That's what I think separates them from some other guys on this list, guys like Travion Henderson, who had that big touchdown to end the second half against Texas, but not necessarily influencing the outcome of games both as a rusher and a receiver. So Quinshon Judkins for his performances in critical moments as well as Nick Singleton really take the cake here in my opinion, and they really deserve to have been on this All-CFP team. Obviously, Quinshon Judkins led all running backs, I believe, in touchdowns at 7. Singleton, obviously, his 3 touchdown performance and his big performance against Boise State standing out as well. So really, really stand out running backs doing their thing in the All-CFP team. Now let's talk about the wide receiver room here, because really two players really define this in big moments for their respective teams, and they're the reason why their respective teams both got to the national championship game. I'm talking about, of course, the ever-impressive Mr. Jeremiah Smith and Jaden Greathouse, the unsung hero of Notre Dame. Let's start off with Jaden Greathouse, though, because Jaden Greathouse did not have a great regular season. In fact, no Notre Dame wide receiver really had a great regular season, as they weren't necessarily a pass-happy team. They lean on the run game, they lean on the physicality, they led with the ground and pound, they led with the aggressive defense that complemented that style of play, and it's ultimately why they got to the national championship game. But it's what Jaden Greathouse did in those two games that really elevated Notre Dame's offense when they needed it. Because against Penn State, they looked really, really lackluster for certain portions of this game. And it wasn't until his electrifying 54-yard catch that tied the game up at 24 really gave Notre Dame a shot to win this game in regulation that Notre Dame really found a receiving threat. It was mainly about attacking you on the ground. And speaking of, I just remember that Jeremiah Love could have definitely been one of the running backs selected to this team as well. How important was he to Notre Dame's success? But still, Quinn Judkins and Nick Singleton can't be argued about. We're sticking with Jaden Greathouse here. Jaden Greathouse's stats: 3 touchdowns, 233 yards in the last 2 playoff games are the reason why Notre Dame didn't go down. And I feel like, and didn't go down fighting, specifically in the national title game. And I feel like Jaden Greathouse, no matter who the quarterback next year is going to have a much better regular season. But now let's talk about perhaps the entire MVP of the college football playoff here. A truly special player, or maybe an alien from up above, because we can't really define what this young man can do. Jeremiah Smith is a very special player. He had perhaps the biggest catch of the entire college football season. 3rd and 11, just over 2 minutes to play. You're driving to basically take control of the national championship game. Make sure Notre Dame doesn't get the ball back. And what do? They play man coverage, leave Christian Gray, no help up top, and Jeremiah Smith sneaks in behind. That's just what he does. And his 56-yard catch defined that championship game. Without that 56-yard catch, who knows what Notre Dame could have done in the final 2 or so minutes of that game. It could have come back, maybe took it into overtime, and it would have been a different story. But Jeremiah Smith, as he often does, saves the day. His 4-game stat line: 19 catches, 381 yards, 5 touchdowns. And yes, most of those came in the game against Oregon. Most of those came in the game against Tennessee. But still, it's a critical moment, that 56-yard catch on 3rd and 11 to cement your status as a national champion that will stand the test of time. And while it's going to go down as one of the greatest wide receiver performances in a college football playoff, especially in the first ever iteration of a 12-team playoff, specifically seeing as to how it was Ohio State as well, Jeremiah Smith, the fact that this is his freshman season, may never really get this much hype again, which is truly incredible to behold. Think about that. This is a true freshman wide receiver getting this hype. In year 2, it's probably going to be the same, but not a lot of people are going to be, like, oh, wow, this kid is still doing this stuff? That's crazy. It's going to be a little bit more muted, which you can't often say about as talented a player as Jeremiah Smith. But that just goes to show that he truly is a defining player. But look at the versatility of these 2 wide receivers here. Jeremiah Smith, who was great all year, setting freshman records left and right for Ohio State. And then Jaden Greathouse, a guy who did nothing all year in the regular season, really, for this Notre Dame team, but came alive for them in the playoffs. It was a big reason as to why Notre Dame's receiving threat really went underrated in those last 2 games, and really defined what was able to get them there in the first place. But now let's talk about another very, very special player at the tight end position. One of the most special players in all of college football. A do-everything hybrid type of player for Penn State who really carried them in that CFP semifinal and could have won that game single-handedly if he had to. Tyler Warren, the undisputed Mackey Award winner for nation's best tight end, and to prove his importance to this Penn State team, listen to this. In the entirety of the college football playoff, and there are, I believe, 3 games. No, 4 because they were a wild card. That's right. In 4 games, Drew Aller only threw 3 touchdowns. And while it's a good thing, seeing as to how Nicholas Singleton is on this list as he carried Penn State to the semifinal, Tyler Warren caught 2 of those touchdown passes, and he could have caught more in terms of how he plays. And he's also very flashy in terms of what he can bring in the running game. He had 27 yards on 3 carries, which is pretty impressive for a guy of his physicality and his nature. So it just goes to show a team like Penn State is never too over-reliant, but still, a guy like Tyler Warren can still be the focal point of what they do offensively, and you can't really stop him. And so that's why I really like what this All-CFP team defines. It's a microcosm of how the CFP can go. It's a microcosm of what represented the college football season. And most importantly, it's a team of second chances. A lot of these guys probably would not have gotten another opportunity in a 4-team format, especially these Ohio State guys and the Notre Dame guys for that matter. But ultimately, that's what makes this 12-team playoff so special. It gives all these unsung players another chance. Should they, much like in the 4-team playoff, have had a chance to miss out. So that's what makes this special, and I really wanted to present it to you guys, even now as we're approaching the 2-way mark of being removed from the CFP championship game. But coming up next, we're continuing with the college football theme in our 4th segment, looking at what could potentially be next for one of the SEC's elite Tennessee Volunteers. We're going to be talking about what they need to do to rebuild and retool potential another CFP appearance under Josh Heupel. We'll be right back after this short break.